Hi everyone, this is KTRU Radio. I'm here with Klark.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
So can you just tell us a little bit about your background before we get started? Where you're from, what you do, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, of course. Well, I was born and raised in Cambridge, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston. And I don't know, I think around high school at one point, asked my parents for a guitar for the holidays one year. And then after that, just started like learning chords and writing my own music and um, have not really stopped since. And unfortunately, it's not my day job. During the day, currently, I kind of work in healthcare. Um, but on the weekends and throughout the weekdays, I'm producing my own music. I'm in a band. I'm performing live, or recently less so, but hopefully in the future we'll get back to playing live venues. Um, but yeah, I basically make R&B inspired pop, and I sing a lot about my identity as a queer and Asian American artist. Um, and so, put out an album 2 years ago called 88, and then more recently have been releasing a few singles, the most recent of which was called Yellow Joy.
Let's go back to 88. Tell me where the name came from.
Oh, that's a great question. Um, First of all, I'm a sucker for symmetry. So just I think visually I love the number. It has so many musical elements to it. There are 88 keys on a piano. Um, it's a significant number for a lot of Chinese American families as well, and that it symbolizes luck. But most directly, it is the tempo of every song on that album. So I was looking for a rhythm that would be just above kind of a typical resting heart rate to sort of represent an early emotion of like just when you're starting to get excited about something or you're feeling a change coming. Your heart rate might rise a little bit to 88 beats per minute. And so that was like the only constraint I gave myself as I was crafting the album. Um, so every song you hear on there is at 88 beats per minute.
So there's two singles that I wanted to talk about specifically on this album. The first one is Mermaids. I heard that you have a sample from like The Little Mermaid. Can you talk to me more about kind of like the inspiration for that? Because I noticed that in your discography, there's a lot of themes relating to like the sea and the ocean.
With Mermaids, it's a song about embracing change, I would say. And rather embracing the fact that sometimes you have to be the one to change rather than asking the world around you to change. So, the song in Mermaids, kind of the underlying story behind it originally was, um, I was falling in love, and at that point, I still didn't fully love myself. Like I wasn't super comfortable being out. And so a lot of it was, the chorus of the song is wild, wild, you don't have to be wild, as if, I was telling this other person, oh, just come be with me and live in the kind of comfort that I have surrounded myself with. You don't have to go out and be wild and be yourself. And then eventually by the end of the song, there's sort of a change and there's a realization, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful to be wild and to just, in other words, follow, you and your heart as you want to be and not put all of these restrictions on yourself. Um, and so the song ends with, we could be wild. We could be wild together. And so I felt like I sort of used this theme of like mermaids and, the ocean and all that as a metaphor for that. And so obviously picking a quote from The Little Mermaids just seemed quite fitting. And then in terms of the aquatic themes throughout the rest of the album, like it wasn't super intentional. It sort of just started weaving itself in as I was writing it. I think it first started with the second song in the album, which is called As I Am. And there are a lot of themes of like home and shelter and weather, and being, home as a way to shield yourself from the storm. But when you're gay and, you have, sometimes if your family isn't accepting or if there's tension there, home becomes less of a safe haven. And so I think the weather themes like rain, etc., sort of just like bled into the rest of the album. And maybe there's something around how my partner is a swimmer, and just I think it all just sort of worked out that way.
The next question, like the next track I wanted to actually talk about was As I Am and Out, again on the 88 album. It seems like there's a juxtaposition where one is trying to ask for acceptance, and then the other is about like, it's like, screw it, I'm like, I am who I am. So can you talk to me about both tracks?
And maybe I'll just share some context on the album first. I wrote the album over about the course of 3 years. And so track by track, chronologically almost, it really traces my journey to self-acceptance, my coming out journey. And so, As I Am is the second track, Out is the last track. And so I think what you pointed out is sort of that progression and attitude and mindset toward myself and toward the world around me. As I Am is about, navigating tension within the family, hoping that, when I have this conversation with my parents, they'll be accepting and that they'll love me as I am. And so there's a lot of heartache and a lot of uncertainty in that song. And then by the end of the album, after tracing this whole journey towards self-acceptance, after falling in love and kind of learning to love myself through that journey, Out is about, I'm so proud to be out. Like, it's not get me out, it's I am proud to be out. And so I think the two songs really trace that change.
That's great to hear. Let's see.
These are very great. These are great questions. I'm very impressed. You've clearly listened to my discography and listened to them.
My best. In your past interview with Retrograde magazine, you stated, whether it's music, Hollywood, literature, art, or politics, queer Asian voices rarely have a seat at the table. And on top of that, there's so little discourse around queer and Asian underrepresentation in pop culture. What do you think, whether it's like listeners or just being members of a community who maybe, like, whether you're allies or people who identify as queer and Asian themselves, can do to change this norm?
I think the first thing we all need to do is start listening to Rachel Bui's on Rice Radio. Clearly, you're doing the really hard but important work of just creating an outlet and a platform for these kinds of voices to be heard. I think that's really been such a big issue for our community since day one, really, like just lack of access and opportunities and platforms. So first I should start with a thank you, I guess, for giving us a stage. But I think to your broader question around allyship and just what do we do when this is the reality, I think two things. One, it probably starts with listening. And that can mean, diversifying and decolonizing the music you listen to, the books you're reading, just the voices you hear every day around you. But secondly, it also means, I think for us as Asian Americans or as queer folks or as, any sort of intersectional identity, it's about sharing your story through your art, whatever that art medium may be. And eventually, when there is kind of a chorus of these diverse voices, that's when folks actually get a sense of the beautiful portrait that I think is queer in Asian America.
We talked earlier about how growing up in like when you were growing up, the first introduction to music was when you were asking for guitar. And then I'm guessing music kind of like was influenced a lot by your life starting from then. Can you talk about your background, whether it's like schooling or your education or just kind of like the community that you're in that influenced your music and your music making process?
No, that's a great question, especially given that y'all are a university-based studio. Um, I think my education and especially my undergraduate experience really shaped my music making. So I was at Harvard College for undergrad, and then I spent a year in England at the University of Cambridge as well, studying contemporary Chinese art. And I think in both academic settings, the number one thing was I was just constantly surrounded by beautiful, amazingly talented musicians and artists. And I found such an amazing community in them, both like just in terms of moral support, like seeing all my friends like really put themselves out there and be vulnerable and make art. But also like literally in terms of recording and producing and mixing, like tactically, I got so many tips from them. And if you listen to 88, my debut album, I think every single song has a feature from one of my closest friends, you know, and so, you know, I recorded half the album in Quad Sound Studios, which is like our on-campus studio, and it was just such an amazing environment to learn from and to collaborate with other musicians around me. And so I really miss that, you know, now that I'm a quote unquote adult and out in the workforce, you know, living in the Bay Area here. It's much harder to just get a bunch of people who love music in the same room. It takes a lot of intentionality. And so that's definitely something I miss about being in an education environment.
Now, this is definitely my the question I've been wanting to ask since we confirmed the interview. First of all, I told this to you earlier, but just wanted to let our listeners know that when I first heard your song Yellow Joy, and every time I listen to it, not gonna lie, I always get a little teary-eyed just because of like, I guess the amount of pride and actual joy and of hearing something so beautiful and encapsulating of kind of like trying to embrace being Asian American, and then for like a subset of us, like being queer Asian American. Talk to us about how the single came to be and the timing of releasing Yellow Joy.
That's a great question. And first of all, thank you for listening to Yellow Joy. It's so cool that I make something here in the Bay, and then, you know, moments later, folks in Houston, Texas are listening to it and playing it, and that it's resonating with them. So that's so cool. Well, I wrote Yellow Joy at the onset of COVID-19, and I wrote it from a place of heartbreak, actually. There was just so much racial animosity towards Asian Americans around me, and I was hearing so many things in the news, experiencing a number of things myself, or hearing about friends who are, you know, victims of racist acts because of it. And that just broke my heart. And so I wanted to almost counter that, like take that rhythm of hatred and transform it into something prideful, something beautiful, something queer and unapologetically Asian American. And, you know, I thought, what better way to do that than to take a historical term, yellow peril, which has been around since the 1800s and has been used to sort of systematically exclude Chinese and Asian Americans from opportunities. I wanted to flip that and turn yellow peril into yellow Yellow Joy. Um, and so it's about exactly that. It's about taking what you've got and being proud of it and doing something amazing with it, which is to just be happily and unapologetically queer and Asian American.
Where can fans find more about your music? Like, where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, of course. Well, again, my stage name is Klark. That's Klark. And so I'm on pretty much every major streaming platform, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, etc. You can also follow me on Instagram at callmeclark. And yeah, I look forward to engaging with you all there. And thank you so much for having me on your show.
Alrighty, now here's for part 2.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Where did your stage name origin come from?
From Superman. I just grew up reading Superman comics and loved this idea of kind of a dual identity and having this hidden power tucked away. So it came from that.
Describe your music making process as a recipe.
As a recipe, gosh, I think the core ingredients would be like insomnia, late night, notes on my phone, and just all the other messy spices that are different elements of my identity and my experiences.
Does pineapple belong on pizza? Yes or no?
No. Hard no.
Ooh, -2 points. Okay. Real or imaginary? What muffin best represents you?
Muffin.
Yes.
Oh, I do not really eat pastries. Maybe like cornmeal. No, no blueberry. I'm classic,
Describe the album 88 in one word, not using any of the words used in the album titles.
That's so hard. It needs to be aquatic and intersectional in some way. Confluence.
For a first-time listener, what is a song that you recommend them from your discography?
Yellow Joy.
What is your personality as a genre of music?
Pop.
Quarantine edition of this part. During quarantine, have you baked bread?
I have not, but I have been making lots of scallion pancakes. I don't know if that counts as bread, but that's my answer. Take it or leave it.
Have you made Dalgona coffee?
No, I haven't. What is that?
I'll explain later.
Okay.
What is the strangest headline you've read as of late?
These are really tough questions. Let me think. The strangest headline? Probably like a cat dialing 911 somewhere.
During quarantine, did you create a TikTok account?
I did. I did. I adopted a cat, and so I made a TikTok for my cat. Sriracha the kitten. Follow him.
Oh, it's so cute. Okay. Toilet paper orientation. Over, under, or it's not even on the roller?
Over, for sure. I'm very strict about that.
So now we're moving on to back to normal stuff. If you can make one unimportant thing free, what would it be?
One unimportant thing for you?
Yes.
Gosh, so many things are important. Just like the enjoyment of nature. Like we should just make all national parks free so that everyone can roam and get fresh air and appreciate the great outdoors. And for the record, that is important.
National parks aren't free?
No, you have to pay to get in. You have to pay for parking too. I think some might be free. But every year I have to pay for a park pass.
Noted. So one more time, can you drop your socials?
Absolutely. On Instagram, I am Call Me Klark. That's Klark. On Facebook, I am Klark Official. And then you can just find my music by searching Klark on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, etc.
Alrighty. Again, thank you so much for this interview, Kevin, or Clark.
It was so great to be here. Thanks again for creating this platform for us Asian American artists and musicians. It's amazing, and I can't wait to continue dialing in.
Alrighty, thank you so much. This is KTRU Radio signing off.